Hello, hello, hello. All right, it's time for the Malison development update. Let me just adjust my mic a bit. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Hello, Whoop-a-Roos Forever, Garju, Lenshark Roar, Eye to Eye, The Matin, June Flower, Scaradactyl, John TD. Hello, hello, hello. So, let's have a quick update. Just a quick update this week. As usual, I'll be playing some more of Kingsfield, the Ancient City, after this update. So if you want to sit back and have a cozy night of dungeon crawling, stay tuned after this stream. I usually start the Kingsfield stream the hour following the update, so it's probably going to be at 9 p.m. tonight. Also, I'll be uploading the dev update of last Sunday to YouTube tomorrow, if you want to catch that. Putting it up a bit later this week because I had to do some light editing on it, and it's been taking way longer to render. So it's going to take forever to upload too. So yeah, I'll be putting it up tomorrow. And it's almost 2 hours long, so it's a lot meatier than my usual updates because I go over all the playtesting results in detail in it, and basically the editing has been just putting text for each of the putting text on screen for each of the question to make it a bit easier to follow, because otherwise it's just my face talking for 2 hours. So yeah, on with the update. This week has been much more chill than last week, much more relaxed. It's been mostly about addressing problems brought up by the playtesters. So, and one of the biggest parts of that was balancing Chapter 1. So there's been two related recurring issues that took most of the time from last week. Chapter 1 has way too many items, which kind of break the game's resource management and the survival feel of the game. And also, the second half of Chapter 1 feels a little too easy, which is kind of related to that, but also an independent problem on its own, right? Early this week, I think it was on Tuesday's stream. I'm not sure. I think it was. On Tuesday's stream, I basically did a slow playthrough of Chapter 1, taking notes for how many items I have at any given point, which sections of the game seem to really burden me with items. I just took a bunch of notes, and then I spent the rest of the week basically addressing those notes. So actually, let's go through those notes. Let's go through those notes now and see... And I can give some comments on them. So there's my notes. This is my big to-do list, my big Chapter 1 to-do list. And for those notes, I basically took the notes and then I highlighted in green when I addressed them. So there you go. That gives you a bit... Oh, wait. I'm not showing it on screen. Oh. Let's see. There it is. I don't know if you can read this. I'll just zoom in on them a bit. There you go. That should be legible, I think, on stream. It's hard to tell from the preview. Okay, so yes. So this here were my notes I took on Tuesday. So first, I did some item density notes. So I basically played through the game, and at specific points of Chapter 1, I took some notes on how many exploration points I had accumulated. Those exploration points is basically that counts how many rooms you've explored. And also how many items I had at each point. So at the end of South Artisan Street, which is like the big sort of extended Chapter 1 tutorial section, I had 21 items. And this is like playing fairly thoroughly, picking up more or less everything that isn't like super, super secret, and even a few secret things. So I had 21 items in my inventory at this point. Also, it is also taking into account equipping items. So I had more than 21 items, but I had equipped everything that made sense to equip. Then At the workshops, after giving the varnish to the luthier, to the violin maker, I had 33 items in inventory. Then after moving towards King Street, I had 40 items. So this is after exploring the basement of the workshops. Then when I arrived at King Street, I had 48 items. This is doing some light exploring on the way there. And then after preparation in King Street, so after like recruiting some characters, buying some items, selling some items, I had 37. So again, this is me trying to act the way that I would expect an average player would act, which that's always a little perilous. But and then King Street, after exploring around without going into the slums or the sewers or the spider's lair, and only partially exploring the Barbican, this is where the problem happens. So right there, exploration. And here at this point, I reached 134 items out of 80. So this is where the explosion of items happen. So that's kind of what I was expecting. That the item balance isn't too bad on the way to King Street, but once you reach King Street, this is where all bets are off. This is where you get way too many items. I also took some more specific notes of things that felt like I could remove them or tweak them. So there was a bottle of brandy in Levitt's basement, and that was like a reward for getting past the locked door, but there's like a boss there, and there's some other items, so I felt that bottle didn't really need to be there. The Weaver's Workshop. So, I took some notes on things to do, things to remove. I removed most items on the Weaver's Workshop because there's a bunch of treasure items you get at the upper floor of the Weaver's Workshop. And those are basically just free items, and they're not useful items. They're just items to sell, so it's literally just inventory clutter. So that was, that's a lot already. Weaver's Basement. So I took a note here that I didn't address yet. I wanted to add an extra monster in the Weaver's Basement. Wait, that's not supposed to... Oh, no. I remember what this note is meant to be. And I know this is actually, like, a mistake here. This is meant to be the workshop's basement. This is actually the part that Scarodactyl is working on. Scarodactyl is working on new assets for the basement of the workshop. And yes, one thing I want to do is to add an extra monster in the workshop basement. Maybe it should be at 17. I'm not sure yet when it should be. So I set it to be at 17 of exploration. Normally, you're leaving towards King Street at exploration points 19. So if you return to the workshop at like 17, you're exploring quite a bit. So this is part of the solution for the game's balance. I'm intending here to make it that as you explore more, extra monsters appear in certain locations. And those are essentially meant as kind of a balance. It's kind of like a softer, sort of better approach to dynamically balancing the difficulty. So some games do something that a lot of RPG players, and I kind of agree with this, dislike, which is like scaling enemies. Like as you get stronger, enemies just get stronger along with you, which it's a kind of irritating approach to the solution of balancing RPGs, because it kind of makes it feel like your character's growth and power is like fake. It's like, it's being compensated for like way too much. So that's I want to avoid this, but a kind of variant of that I think actually is way better is to, instead of just making each individual monster stronger, to just put more monsters. And like especially unique monsters. Like a whole new monster that you would never see before just shows up in an old room if you've explored the game a lot. It's actually also based on exploration, not on your level. So this is the idea here, is that basically if you explore the game really thoroughly, that means you have way more resources because you've been picking up way more stuff. And so to try to compensate this, to try to force you to use some of those resources a bit, just adding a few extra monsters that are really nasty in some sort of global central areas to add a little bit of extra threat when you return to those areas after you're exploring more, right? So this is part of the approach I want to take to try and balance the game. And so yeah, the workshop's basement, that was one location I was thinking. Also I thought it could also be maybe in workshop upper floor instead. Not too sure which it should be, but yeah, something like this. So yeah, some tweaks on the starting items of certain characters. So some characters join your party and they have a lot of items. And I tweaked this a bit. I made them that they don't join with nearly as many, and you kind of actually have to equip them with items instead. So that feels like, you're getting a party member already. Having them come with a bunch of treasure, like it's an extra, like you're already feeling that reward of having a new party member with you. You don't really need the extra. And so that also uses up more of your resources to have to equip them. So that's also going to help a bit with the balancing there. Yeah. One thing I haven't actually addressed yet is that when you give items to Levitt in order to get him to like you early on, actually just to be a nice person, of course. But if you give him a bunch of items and then he joins your party, he just still has these items you gave to him, which means there's literally no reason not to give him everything you want, because when he joins you, you just get all of it back, which that's a bit dumb. So I'm going to make it that whenever you give him an item early on, he automatically uses them partially. So at least there is like an actual cost to giving him these items. So you don't get them fully back. You lose some of it, at least. The workshop, get rid of the chest near the back exit. So that's one place in the workshop that had a chest. And again, it's like you already have a reward here. You don't need that extra thing of having a treasure chest full of items. That exit already gives you access to a bunch more places to explore, and that's kind of a reward on its own. So I removed the chest there. The workshop's hive, get rid of the gem. Again, just removing some extra items that don't really need to be there. You don't really need that extra bit of clutter in your inventory at this point. Here, that's another thing here. So this one I kind of already addressed it. So there's a brewery in Chapter 1, and it was kind of missing like a nasty sort of unique monster. And I had an idea of just adding a completely new monster, but what I ended up doing instead was making one of the existing characters there turn into a much nastier fight than it looks. And I think that basically is, it's not quite what I was... The note that's why I made it yellow. It's not I didn't exactly do this, but I did something like it. So I might still also add another monster there, but that's why I'm leaving it yellow here. So remove the almanac book spawn from Levitt's house, replace with generic bookcase fill. Switch. Oh yeah, this is a major one here. So one of the other issues of the balancing in Chapter 1 is that beds. When you find beds in Chapter 1, you could before use any bed that you wanted to sleep. And when you sleep in a bed, you basically just get a full party heal for free. Now, the beds have a limited number of uses each. When you sleep in a bed, it gets like soiled with like dark fluids. It's weird. It kind of makes sense in context, but basically, beds have a limited number of uses. Problem is, there were a lot of beds. There were so many beds that the fact you could only use them a number of times was kind of like, didn't change anything. You basically could still heal forever. So I removed that. I made it that now you can only sleep in some specific beds that are in safe locations. In Levitt's house, in Harris's house, and in the King's Pub. These are now the only 3 places in Chapter 1, and actually right now in the entire game, because I need to also make the tweaks in the other chapters. But now these are the only beds you can actually use to sleep, which means, now healing is a lot more scarce in the game, which should also help with the resource management issues. where now you actually need to use food and healing potions to heal yourself. You can't just go back to the latest bed, or at least you can do that, but it's now it's a much more limited resource now. So that should, I think, also help with the balance. Also, another issue is that, Chapter 1 has a lot of these insect mutants, these bug mutants, and also just regular bugs too, or like just little bugs. Monsters, and when you kill them, they tend to drop like hearts and guts and meat. They drop like this bug meat. And that actually just filled your inventory so much. This was one of the biggest thing that just filled your inventory in Chapter 1, was just all of the bug stuff. So I halved the rate that these things drop, so you don't get nearly as much. You still get quite a bit. It is meant to be a kind of plentiful source of food in Chapter 1. It is meant to kind of make the resource management a bit easier in Chapter 1, because you don't have a lot of funds yet. You don't have a lot of, like, places to trade, to buy food at. So, it's just a good idea to give you a little bit of flexibility, but also eating the bug meat has a consequence. It's not great for you. You might catch something eating all of it. So that's, yeah. So I reduced the drop rate. You still get quite a bit of it, but it's no longer something that fills your inventory. Also, the bug heart was like the best of these like bug food items. And it used to be like an item that you could eat like 4 or 5 bites out of each. Right? So, and it didn't stack too. So that could also just fill your inventory. So I made it a bit weaker. I made it that there's only 1 charge of each, and it stacks up to like 5 of them. So again, it's gonna shrink a little bit, reduce a little bit of the inventory clutter here. Here's some specific items. Like there was basically a free set of armor in one of the buildings in King Street. That's way too good for how easy it is to get. So I pushed it a little bit deeper in that area. So you need to explore a bit more. You need to fight some nastier monsters to get it. And I also made it a bit weaker. So instead of it's a hauberk. A hauberk is like a ring, like a scale mail, or like a ring mail armor. It's mail armor, but it's really, really good. So I made it like a rusty set of it. So it's still good, but it breaks a lot faster. So instead of being like a nearly like permanent upgrade to your defense, it's a more temporary one. Mallory had a bunch of items in her inventory. She had like a free like book to learn certain skills. She had like a combat knife, which made no sense. She's not skilled with using knives. So I removed that. I removed one of her food items that she comes with. And I gave her a heavy club, which is actually like clubs and maces starting weapon skills. So that makes more sense. Also, same thing with Donovan. Donovan had a bunch of extra stuff. I removed that. Some items in the inn. I changed a little bit how the books work in the game. Because books exist in a bunch of different tiers. So there's tier 0, tier 1. And the tier 0 books were the most common, but they're also kind of the least useful. Tier 0 books tend to just be like... tier 0 books tend to be like lore books that just teach you like how to identify certain kinds of items. And there's way fewer tier 0 books than there are tier 1 books. And because of that, since tier 0 is the most common and also not a very diverse set, it means that it felt like most of the books you got were like the same 1 or 2. So that's not great. So yeah, I made it that tier 0 and tier 1 are kind of equal in drop rate now. It's still going to feel like the tier 0 ones are most common because there's fewer of them. So when it picks from the tier 0 like pool of books, it's going to give you more often the same ones, right? So it's still going to feel like tier 0 are the most common, but it's not going to double down on that likelihood. So it should feel a bit better on that. The embasement, I made the rats more dangerous. All the rat enemies were just way too weak, considering that most of them you fight halfway through the chapter and not at the start of it. And so for halfway through the chapter, they were way too weak. So I made them like nastier, stronger. There's a thing here I didn't do yet. Here's another note about adding an extra monster in one building in the locksmith's house. Some more notes about making certain mutants stronger. So a lot of the mutants in the game, like past the halfway point of chapter 1, a lot of the mutants that you encountered, they tend to just die before they can even attack you. They just don't have nearly enough HP for the fact that, past the halfway point of chapter 1, you tend to have like a 3 or 4 person party. You start to have better weapons. So at this point, enemies kind of need to be kicked up a notch a bit. So, I made the enemies past the halfway point a bit stronger. I made them just a bit more resilient. Some tweaks here for the inn. The inn here, oh yes, that's something I need to do still. The inn basement needs some nastier enemies. The Barbican guards, that was another point. Something else that was really cluttering inventories is that all of the guards you fight in the Barbican, these corrupted guards that you fight there, they dropped way too many items. Everyone you killed basically dropped a helmet, a piece of armor, and a spear. And that was just way too much. If you went through the Barbican, you ended up with like 20 of each of these. So I lowered the drop rate of these items. There was also another free set of really good armor in the upper floor of the Barbican. I switched it for a cursed set of armor instead. So that's it's a bit more of a little prank, a little game prank. Again, just tweaking some monsters to make them stronger, to make them a nastier fight. And then finally, some bugs that actually don't come from the playtesting. This is stuff that I found as I did that playtest, to figure out balancing issues. So these are bugs related to balancing, essentially, and also related to inventory management. So one is the stacking issue. There was a problem where if you had a stack of items and that stack was filled. It was like a full stack. Say you have a bunch of bread, pieces of bread, right? And say you can stack pieces of bread. So if you have 9 pieces of bread in your inventory, they only take 1 spot, right? Then if you took more bread, instead of making a second stack, it would just fail to stack after the first one. And it would just fill your inventory as a single pieces of bread. So yeah, it basically it failed to stack after the first stack didn't work. It's weird, but now this one, it's kind of scary because I found that it wasn't a bug. It was literally that I commented out. I removed the part of the code that made this work. I had to unseal ancient code, and I still don't know why I had sealed it away, which is a little scary. It's wait, I must have had a reason to disable this, right? What was the reason? And I tested it and it seemed to work fine. And it must be something I did a long time ago. So that's a little scary. It's wait, why is this... Why was this commented out? Why was this removed from the game? Why did I do this? Did I unleash something unspeakable into the game? Is there going to be a horrible bug that rears its ugly head soon? Who knows? But yeah, that's always a little scary when you find that. When you find, wait, why did I remove this? Why did I do that? Well, I guess I'll put it back in. Yeah, always a little sinister. We'll see. I mean, so far it seems to be fine. It might be because that code early on was causing a few problems, and maybe it was just before a playtest, right? And maybe I was like, okay, I don't have time to deal with this. This build needs to go up now. And, this build needs to go up now, and I don't have time to figure this out, so I'll just comment it out, simplify it, and then I just never return to it. That's what I presume, but I guess we'll see. Also, yeah, some issues with certain items being listed in the wrong spot. Empowering potions were listed in the wrong category of your item. So a few little issues here. Some gems don't have names. Blah blah blah. Oh yeah, the cleave attack. I had to fix that. The cleave attack. I don't think I did that on stream. But yeah, certain attacks needed to have some fixes. Certain attacks. Basically, the problem here was with attacks where attacks that hit multiple enemies but have just one animation had a problem. So the way that combat was coded, if you hit multiple enemies, you would be doing the attack on each of them in a turn. And the cleave attack is supposed to be one big shoosh attack that hits multiple enemies. And that didn't work. That code was just not functional. And now I fixed it, so there you go. So now it should work. Now you can actually do the cleave attack, and it hits everybody. And there you go. Also, the ballista didn't work. The ballista, when you use the ballista to break the door in the Barbican, you shoot like this giant like spear, and it breaks through a door. That didn't work for some reason, and I fixed it, but that's another of these little things where it's like I'm not sure why it didn't work, because it kind of just worked easily. But anyway, so yeah, that was basically what I did last week there. There were a few other bugs that I fixed that were from the playtest. There were a few other things I fixed that were from the playtesters, and those are not noted there, but yeah. Alright, so yeah, that was most of my work last week, alongside also doing some work on remaining issues, which I had some progress with, but so I have a few to go through. I fixed some issues brought up about certain quests with broken endings, blah, blah, blah. Coming up next week, I should be done with the playtest issues reported soon, now that the biggest issue, the balance stuff, is addressed. So next week I'll begin work on the faction stuff. So basically I'll begin work next week on all of the Chapter 1 stuff that ends up in Chapter 2. So the factions, some of the character quests, I want to start working on all the things that are set up in Chapter 1 that have a payoff in Chapter 2. That's what I want to focus on next week. I'm also going to begin making some more detailed plans about the Chapter 2 work and prioritizing the order of all the Chapter 2 quests and tasks. I want to enter January with my work all cut out for me, so I can really dive in. I think I should have a solid plan for Chapter 2 by Christmas. And then I'll probably take like a 2 weeks off for like the last week of December and the first week of January. So I should be all fresh to really to dive into Chapter 2. By January. So yeah, that's the plan ahead. That's basically it. So if there aren't any questions, I'll go take a little break. I'm going to go take a little walk, and then when I'm back, I'll be resuming my Kingsfield game. So that should be fun. Again, if you want to tune in to some cozy dungeon crawling, just stay tuned or check again at 9 p.m. in 30 minutes. All right. So thank you all for watching. And see you in just a little bit.